"Rancher, every time I bend over, I see you looking at me. Don't deny it," said the sensual Apache woman. The sun hung low over the wide, open fields of the ranch, painting the dusty ground with golden light. John, the rancher, wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned on the wooden fence. His hands were rough from years of work, and his clothes carried the smell of hay and leather. The ranch had been his home for as long as he could remember. Rolling hills, scattered mesquite trees, and herds of cattle stretched as far as the eye could see. Life here was simple, predictable, and sometimes lonely. He glanced toward the trail leading to the main road, half expecting a visitor to pass by. Visitors were rare. Most people preferred the safety of towns and the comfort of homes closer to the city. But today, he noticed movement in the distance, a small figure making her way along the dirt path. As she came closer, he could see she moved with a grace that caught his attention. She wore a colorful shawl over her shoulders, patterned in reds and browns, and carried a small satchel with supplies. Her hair was long and black, flowing like the river he remembered from his youth. When she finally stepped onto the ranch, John instinctively straightened up. There was something about her presence that demanded notice. She moved confidently, her eyes scanning the surroundings with an awareness he had rarely seen in visitors. She looked directly at him and smiled, a slight curve of her lips that made him feel a flutter in his chest he wasn't used to noticing. "Hello," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm Nava. I've come to help with the work here for a while. I've traveled from the nearby village to trade and lend a hand." John nodded slowly. "I'm John. Welcome to the ranch. You'll find there's plenty to do." "Are you used to hard work?" His voice carried a mix of curiosity and caution. "I am," she replied without hesitation. "I've worked on farms and with cattle before. I can handle myself." There was a quiet intensity in her words. She didn't sound boastful, but she made it clear she was capable. John felt a mix of relief and admiration. Most people who came to the ranch were city folk who couldn't manage even the simplest chores. But there was something different about her. As she began to unload her satchel, John watched her movements. She bent down to lift a heavy bundle of blankets, and for a moment their eyes met. She didn't look away. "Every time I bend over, I see you looking at me," she said, her voice light but teasing. "Don't deny it." John felt a heat rise to his face. He cleared his throat and looked away, focusing on the task at hand. "I wasn't looking," he muttered, though he knew she wouldn't believe him. Nava chuckled softly. "It's okay." "I don't mind." Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of playfulness and confidence. John realized that she had said it not to embarrass him, but to see how he would react. Her words were daring, but there was no malice. The first day passed with introductions and chores. Nava quickly proved herself capable. She handled the livestock with skill, mended fences with determination, and even managed to coax the shyest cows into moving with a gentle, commanding voice. John observed her in silence at times, impressed by her strength and grace. She seemed at ease in the open landscape, as if she had always belonged to the wide plains and endless skies. During the midday break, they sat by the small creek that ran along the edge of the property. John took a sip of water from his canteen while Nava cleaned the dust from her hands. The quiet sound of flowing water filled the space between them, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. "You work hard," Nava said finally, breaking the silence. "Most men here spend the morning complaining about chores. You just get them done." John shrugged, not used to compliments. "It's the way it has to be. Ranch life doesn't wait for anyone. If you don't do it, nothing gets done." Nava nodded thoughtfully. "I like that. It's honest work. I respect that." There was a pause, and then she added lightly, "And I can see that you take pride in it. That's rare these days." John felt a strange sense of warmth in her words. He wasn't used to being noticed for his efforts beyond the results themselves. Most people assumed ranch life was simple, even boring, and overlooked the dedication it required. Nava didn't. She seemed to understand the rhythm of his world without needing explanations. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Nava helped John feed the livestock. Her hands were steady as she carried buckets of feed, and she laughed lightly when the younger calves bumped into her, curious and hungry. John found himself smiling, enjoying the sound of her laughter more than he expected. By evening, the work was done, and the ranch settled into a calm quiet. John prepared dinner over the small stove, and Nava helped set the table. They ate in companionable silence at first, the crackling fire in the hearth providing warmth and light. Later, conversation flowed more easily. She told stories of her travels, of the village she came from, and of the lessons she had learned while working the land. John listened, fascinated. She spoke with honesty and a quiet strength that made him feel both challenged and inspired. She didn't try to impress him with grand tales, yet every story carried meaning and depth. He began to see that she was someone who could change his life simply by being herself. After dinner, they cleaned up and stepped outside to enjoy the night air. The sky was clear, and countless stars shimmered above. The ranch was peaceful at this hour, the sounds of cattle and distant coyotes mixing with the rustle of the wind. Nava leaned on the fence, looking at the horizon. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "I can see why you stay." John stood beside her, feeling a quiet connection. "It's not just the land," he said. "It's the life it gives you, hard but honest. You get to see the results of your work every day. You get to know the land, the animals, the seasons. It's part of who you are." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I like that. I've always believed that life should be lived with purpose, and I can see that you do." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was comfortable, filled with shared understanding and respect. Then Nava looked at him with a teasing smile. "Don't try to hide it this time," she said. "I know you've been watching me since I got here." John felt a rush of embarrassment, but also amusement. He chuckled. "Maybe a little," he admitted, "but only because you make it impossible not to notice." Her laughter rang out, clear and genuine. It wasn't flirtation meant to lead anywhere, he realized, but a challenge to see if he could meet her confidence with his own honesty. He admired that quality in her. She wasn't afraid of him, and she wasn't afraid of herself. As the night grew colder, they went inside the small ranch house to rest. John couldn't shake the sense that this encounter, this meeting with someone so unlike anyone he had ever known, might change his life in ways he couldn't yet see. The first day ended with the ordinary tasks of ranch life, tending to animals, preparing meals, and repairing fences. But beneath the ordinary, there was a spark, a mix of curiosity, respect, and something deeper that neither could yet name. It was the start of something that promised both challenge and connection, a story that would unfold slowly, shaped by shared work, trust, and quiet revelations. John lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into darkness. He thought of Nava and the way she moved, the way she spoke, and the unspoken understanding in her eyes. For the first time in years, he felt anticipation, not for a visit, not for a letter, not for any ordinary event, but for what tomorrow might bring. He realized that ranch life, though simple, could hold surprises. And some of the most important ones might come from the people who walked into your world unannounced, who challenged you, and who made you see yourself differently. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint scent of earth and livestock. And as the stars twinkled above the vast fields, John knew that this first day, this simple meeting with a capable and confident woman named Nava, was only the beginning of a story that would leave a lasting mark on both their lives. The morning sun spilled over the hills in soft, warm light, touching the dusty fields and casting long shadows from the fences and scattered trees. John rose early, as he always did, and moved quietly through the ranch. The smell of dew and earth filled the air, and he felt the familiar satisfaction that came with starting the day in the open fields. Today, however, he wasn't alone. Nava was already awake, moving around the kitchen area, preparing a small breakfast over the stove. She hummed softly to herself, and John could hear the sound even from the other room. The aroma of freshly cooked eggs and coffee drifted through the house, a comforting smell that made the ranch feel alive in a new way. John stepped into the kitchen, stretching his arms. "You're up early," he said. "I like the morning," Nava replied, her tone light but determined. "The work is easier when the air is cool and the animals are calm." She placed a plate of eggs and bread in front of him. "You eat first. You'll need energy for the morning chores." John nodded, grateful for the gesture. As he ate, he watched her move around the kitchen with practiced ease, setting plates, filling water buckets, and checking on the animals outside. There was a quiet confidence in everything she did, a sense that she belonged to the land even though she had just arrived. After breakfast, they stepped outside to begin the day's work. The ranch was busy in the morning hours. Cattle needed feeding, fences needed checking, and the fields required attention. John handed Nava a set of tools and led her toward the northern pasture. "You'll need to repair the fence here," he said. "It's been loose since the last storm. Some of the cattle have wandered near the edge and we can't risk losing them. Nava nodded, examining the wooden posts carefully. I can fix this. Show me how you usually do it. John watched as she worked, impressed by her attention to detail. She didn't rush, but she moved quickly enough to get the job done efficiently. Every nail she hammered, every post she straightened, showed that she had experience and skill. John felt a quiet respect growing for her, not just for her strength, but for the care she took in every action. As they worked side by side, conversation flowed easily. They spoke about the land, the cattle, and the seasonal challenges of ranch life. Nava asked questions that revealed her intelligence and curiosity, while John found himself explaining things he had taken for granted for years. You know, Nava said, wiping sweat from her brow, there's a rhythm to this work. You can feel it if you pay attention. The land, the animals, they all tell you something if you listen. John nodded slowly. Most people don't listen. They see the land as something to use, not something to understand. That's true, she replied. But understanding brings respect, and respect brings success. There was a quiet moment between them, filled with the sound of wind in the trees and the low murmur of cattle grazing. John felt that connection, the one he had first noticed the day she arrived, strengthening in the simple act of working together. By midday, they took a break near the creek, sitting on the smooth stones at the edge of the water. Nava dipped her hands into the cool stream, letting the water run over her fingers. It's beautiful here, she said, smiling, even more than I imagined. John watched her, noticing the way the sunlight played in her hair, how her eyes reflected the clear sky. He felt a flutter of something unfamiliar, admiration mixed with curiosity, a desire to know her better. You've traveled far, he said. Your village, it must be very different from here. It is, Nava replied. But there's something similar too. Life is about hard work, about taking care of the land and each other. That's the same no matter where you are. John nodded, appreciating the insight. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the creek and the gentle sounds of the ranch. It was a rare moment of peace in a life usually filled with work and responsibility. After the break, they returned to the fields. Nava guided a small herd of cattle back toward the barn, her movements confident and sure. John followed, helping when needed, but mostly letting her take the lead. She had a natural authority with the animals that surprised him. The shyest calves followed her without hesitation, sensing her calm energy. As they worked, John began to notice small things about her. The way she tilted her head when thinking, the quiet determination in her hands, the way her laughter could fill even the wide-open fields. He realized that he was paying attention in a way he hadn't with anyone in years. Nava wasn't just a visitor or a helper. She was becoming a part of the rhythm of the ranch and of his life. By late afternoon, the sun had climbed high and the work had taken its toll. They rested under a large mesquite tree, sipping water and catching their breath. Nava leaned back, looking at the sky, her expression thoughtful. You work so hard, she said softly. Most people would complain or take shortcuts. But you keep going, even when it's difficult, John shrugged. It's just how it is. The ranch doesn't wait for anyone. You do what needs to be done or you fall behind. I can see that, she said, smiling, and I respect it. It's not easy to keep up this pace, to care for so much land and so many animals. But you do it with patience. That's rare. John felt a warmth in her words. He wasn't used to people noticing the effort behind the work rather than just the results. Most visitors assumed ranch life was simple, maybe even boring. Nava didn't. She understood the value of labor, of persistence, and of attention to detail. The late afternoon was spent repairing a section of the barn roof that had loosened in the last storm. John climbed carefully, showing Nava where the beams were weak. She followed his instructions, but also offered suggestions based on her own experience. Together, they worked efficiently, their movements in sync as if they had been doing this together for years. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, John and Nava stepped back to admire their work. The barn stood stronger than before, the fence was secure, and the cattle were safely back in their pens. There was a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the physical labor. It was a shared achievement built on cooperation and trust. You know, Nava said lightly, I can tell you care about this place, about the land, the animals, and about your life here. Most people don't feel that way, they just exist. John looked at her, meeting her gaze. It's all I've ever known, and I do care, maybe more than I realized until now. There was a pause, filled only with the sounds of the evening wind. Nava smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. I like that. I like seeing people who care. It makes life better, and it makes the work worthwhile. As twilight fell, they walked toward the house, their shadows long on the ground. The ranch was quiet, the animals settling in for the night, the wind rustling the trees softly. John felt a growing sense of connection with Nava, a feeling that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with trust and understanding. Over dinner, they shared stories of their pasts. John spoke of his childhood on the ranch, the lessons he had learned from his father, and the loneliness that often came with living in such an isolated place. Nava shared stories of her family, her village, and the experiences that had shaped her strong, independent spirit. You've seen a lot in your life, John said, impressed, and yet you carry yourself with such confidence, it's admirable. I've had too, she replied simply. Life teaches you lessons, sometimes hard ones, but it also teaches you who you are if you pay attention. There was a quiet intensity to her words, a depth that made John think. He realized that he had underestimated the richness of her experiences, and he felt honored to be hearing them. After dinner, they stepped outside once more, enjoying the cool evening air. The stars were bright in the clear sky, and the ranch seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. Nava leaned on the fence, watching the horizon. You know, she said softly, I like it here. It feels honest, real, and I can tell you live your life the same way. John stood beside her, feeling a strange but pleasant flutter in his chest. It's not perfect, he said, but it's ours, and it's worth caring for. Nava turned to him, her eyes catching the starlight. I can see that, and I respect it. You respect the land, and you respect yourself. That's rare. For a long moment, they stood together in silence, listening to the quiet of the ranch at night. John realized that the spark he had felt when Nava first arrived had grown into something deeper. It wasn't just attraction. It was a bond built on shared work, respect, and the slow, steady understanding of each other's character. As the night grew colder, they finally went inside to rest, each carrying a sense of fulfillment from the day's labor and the conversations that had deepened their connection. John lay in bed, thinking of Nava, her words, her strength, and the quiet way she had begun to change the rhythm of his days. He knew that tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, and more opportunities to learn from each other. And he looked forward to it, not with obligation but with anticipation. For the first time in a long while, ranch life felt fuller, not just the land or the animals, but the people who shared it with him. And in the quiet of the night, John understood that the arrival of Nava was no ordinary visit. It was the beginning of something meaningful, a story that would unfold with patience, respect, and the shared rhythm of life on the ranch. The morning air was crisp, and a thin layer of frost covered the grass as John stepped outside. The ranch stretched endlessly under the pale light, the hills and fences shimmering in the early sun. John inhaled deeply. Today promised to be a long day, and he could already feel the pull of responsibility weighing on his shoulders. Nava was already outside, gathering the tools they would need for the work ahead. She moved with quiet efficiency, her movements precise and calm. Good morning, she said, her voice carrying across the frost-covered field. Looks like another busy day. John nodded, approaching her. It will be. We need to check the northern pasture again. Some of the cattle wandered close to the creek yesterday. I want to make sure they haven't strayed too far. Nava smiled lightly, her eyes bright with energy. Lead the way. They worked together in silence for the first hour, moving carefully through the frost-dampened grass. The cattle were restless in the cold, their low moans carrying across the fields. Nava walked confidently among them, her hands gentle yet firm as she guided them along. John followed, offering advice when necessary, but mostly observing her skill. She's amazing with the animals, he thought, impressed by how they responded to her. Every movement she made seemed to calm the herd, and the shyest calves followed her without hesitation. As they reached the edge of the northern pasture, John noticed a small gap in the fence, one that had been widened by the recent storm. A sense of urgency gripped him. If the cattle got out, they could wander far, and it would take hours to bring them back safely. Looks like we'll need to repair this quickly, John said. If we don't fix it, the herd could scatter. Nava knelt by the broken section, examining the posts carefully. We can do it, she said calmly, but we'll need to work fast. The cattle are restless, and more could come this way. John handed her the tools while he guided the herd toward a safer section of the pasture. The work was hard, demanding, and precise. They hammered, measured, and lifted together, moving with a rhythm that spoke of experience and teamwork. John felt a strange mixture of fatigue and exhilaration, the kind that comes when you work side by side with someone who understands the same goals and shares the same drive. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from the far side of the field. A cow had broken away, and its distressed calls caused the rest of the herd to panic. John's heart pounded. He and Nava acted immediately, running toward the group with determined shouts and steady hands. The scene became chaotic in moments. Cattle ran in different directions, some knocking into fences, others darting toward the open land beyond the ranch. John shouted instructions while Nava moved among the animals with calm authority, steering them back together. Their movements were synchronized, each anticipating the other's actions. "Watch the young ones," Nava called, her voice clear and strong. John grabbed a stray calf by the neck, guiding it back toward the herd. Nava was already there, her hands steady as she lifted another calf from a cluster of running animals. The two of them worked quickly, relying on instinct and experience, their bond strengthened by the urgency of the moment. After nearly an hour, the herd was finally under control, secured safely behind the repaired fence. Both John and Nava were exhausted, sweat mixing with the chill in the air, but there was a sense of victory. They had managed to protect the animals and prevent a disaster. John leaned against a fence post, breathing heavily. "We did it," he said, a note of relief in his voice. Nava smiled, wiping her hands on her trousers. "Yes." Together, her eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, standing amidst the calmed herd. The tension of the morning had brought them closer in ways neither had expected. John realized that his feelings for Nava had grown stronger, admiration mingled with a quiet sense of affection. He noticed how her calmness in the chaos had reassured him, how her confidence had inspired trust. As the sun climbed higher, they rested briefly under the shade of a large oak tree. Nava drank from her water bottle, her expression thoughtful. "You handled yourself well," John said finally, breaking the silence. "I don't think anyone else could have managed that as calmly as you did," Nava laughed softly. "I've seen my share of trouble before. You learn to stay calm or risk losing control." John nodded, impressed. "I've lived on this ranch my whole life, and I've never faced a situation quite like that." "I can see that," Nava replied. "And that's why you stayed calm enough to guide the herd. You just needed the right partner." John felt a warmth in her words that went beyond the practical praise. There was something personal in the way she spoke, an acknowledgement of his character and his abilities. He felt a surge of gratitude, and more than that, a desire to connect further with her. The rest of the afternoon passed with more work, but the tension had shifted into a quiet intimacy. They repaired fences, checked water troughs, and guided cattle back to the barn. Each task was accompanied by small conversations, laughter, and shared glances that revealed their growing bond. As the day wore on, a storm began to form in the distance. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and the wind picked up, sending dust swirling through the fields. John frowned. "Looks like we're going to get rain soon. We need to get the animals inside before it starts." Nava nodded, her expression serious. "We can do it. Let's work together." They moved quickly, herding cattle toward the barn with urgency. The storm approached faster than expected, and soon rain began to fall in heavy sheets. The sound of raindrops hitting the tin roof of the barn was deafening, mixing with the low bellowing of the cattle. Inside the barn, they secured gates and ensured each animal had space. Water dripped from the roof, and the air was filled with the scent of wet hay and livestock. John and Nava worked tirelessly, their clothes soaked, their hair plastered to their faces. Yet even in the chaos, there was a sense of purpose. They were protecting something valuable, working together as a team. After the barn was secured, they took a moment to catch their breath, leaning against the wooden posts. John looked at Nava, noticing how determined and strong she appeared, even in the pouring rain. "You're incredible," he said, his voice loud enough to be heard over the storm. "I don't know what I would have done without you today." Nava smiled, her eyes reflecting the stormy light. "We make a good team," she said simply. "That's all that matters." The rain continued, but the storm had brought them closer. They moved inside the small ranch house, dripping wet and shivering, but their spirits were high. Nava started a fire in the hearth while John prepared warm drinks. The heat from the fire chased away the chill, and they sat close, drying off and sharing quiet conversation. "You know," John said after a while, "I've faced many challenges on this ranch. Storms, stray cattle, broken fences, but today felt different. I felt alive in a way I haven't felt in years." Nava looked at him, her expression softening. "It's the connection," she said, "with the land, the animals, and with each other. That's what makes the work meaningful." John nodded, understanding her point. He realized that the morning's chaos had revealed more than just their ability to handle a crisis. It had shown him the value of trust, partnership, and shared purpose. Nava had become more than a helper on the ranch. She had become a part of the rhythm of his life, someone he could rely on and respect deeply. As the storm subsided, they moved outside once more, watching the sky lighten as the clouds drifted away. The ranch, wet and glistening, looked renewed. The land had survived, and so had they. John turned to Nava, feeling a mixture of admiration and something more profound. I want to thank you," he said. "Not just for today, but for being here. You've changed how I see this place, and maybe even how I see myself." Nava smiled, her gaze steady. "I came here to help, and I did, but I think we've both learned something today about work, about trust, and about each other." For the first time, John allowed himself to acknowledge the depth of his feelings. He realized that the bond he felt with Nava wasn't fleeting attraction. It was respect, admiration, and the beginnings of a real connection built on shared experiences. The evening fell and the ranch was quiet once more. They shared a simple meal by the fire, the warmth filling the house and their spirits. Outside, the land glistened under the newly washed sky, the cattle resting peacefully. John and Nava sat together, talking softly, learning more about each other's pasts, hopes, and dreams. As night deepened, John looked at Nava and felt a quiet certainty. Their connection had been tested by work, by challenge, and by the unexpected storm. And through it all, they had proven something to each other, that together they could face anything. He knew that tomorrow would bring new tasks and new challenges, but he also knew that they would face them side by side, stronger than before. The bond they had begun to build was no longer uncertain. It was real, tested by action, and deepened by trust. And as the stars twinkled above the quiet ranch, John realized that the events of this day, the crisis, the work, and the shared determination, had changed the course of both their lives in ways neither could have predicted. The next morning arrived calm and clear, with sunlight spilling over the ranch like a promise. The storm from the previous day had left the fields sparkling, dew clinging to every blade of grass, and the air smelled of wet earth and fresh beginnings. John stepped outside, feeling the weight of the past days, the work, the challenges, the storm, but also a quiet satisfaction. The ranch was intact, the cattle were safe, and there was a sense of accomplishment that went deeper than any single task. Nava was already outside, moving among the animals with the same confidence and care she had shown since the day she arrived. She noticed John approaching and smiled warmly. "Morning," she said. "The herd is calm today." "I think they've learned not to wander too far after yesterday's adventure," John chuckled. "You mean the stampede? I think they're smart enough to respect the fence now, thanks to you." Nava shook her head, still smiling. "We both worked together. They felt our confidence and they followed it. That's all." There was a moment of quiet between them, filled with the gentle sounds of the ranch waking up, the low calls of the cattle, the rustle of wind through the trees, and the distant cawing of birds. John felt that the connection between them had grown stronger than ever. It wasn't just shared work or surviving a storm. It was the trust, respect, and understanding that had blossomed quietly, day by day. They spent the morning checking fences, moving cattle to fresh grazing areas, and repairing a small water trough that had developed a leak. Each task flowed naturally, their movements in sync as if they had been working together for years. Conversations were easy, filled with small laughter, shared stories, and quiet moments of observation. "You know," Nava said as she adjusted a gate latch, "I think this ranch suits you. It's a hard life, yes, but it has purpose. You've built something here worth caring for." John paused, looking at her with quiet intensity. "It does feel like purpose," he admitted. "But it feels even better when someone understands it, someone who sees the work behind the work. That's what you've done. You've seen it and you've respected it." Nava's smile softened. "I've seen it, John, and I respect it because I see you in it. You're not just keeping the ranch alive, you're part of it, and that matters." The afternoon was spent guiding cattle toward a distant pasture. The sun was warm on their backs, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of earth and hay. Nava led the way with quiet confidence, and John followed, sometimes offering advice, sometimes simply walking alongside her. The rhythm of their steps, the shared work, and the peacefulness of the land made the moment feel timeless. As they reached the edge of the pasture, Nava paused, turning to look at John. "I have to say," she said softly, "working with you has been different from anything I expected. I didn't just come to help, I think I've learned from you too." John looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. "I've learned from you as well," he replied honestly. "You've shown me patience, confidence, and a perspective I didn't realize I was missing, and you've reminded me how important connection is, not just with the land, but with people." Nava's eyes softened, and she stepped closer. "I think we both needed that," she said. "This ranch and these past days, they've shown us more than work. They've shown us what trust and partnership mean." John's heart felt full, and he realized he could no longer ignore the feelings that had been growing quietly inside him. He had admired her skill, her courage, and her calm presence, but now he saw her as more than a partner in work. He saw her as someone he cared for deeply. "You know," he said carefully, "I've been thinking I don't want this connection we've built to be temporary. I want it to last as part of the ranch and as part of my life." Nava looked at him, her expression serious but gentle. "I was hoping you'd say that," she replied. "I feel the same way, John. What we have here, it's real, and I want to see where it goes." A breeze swept through the pasture, rustling the leaves of nearby trees. The cattle moved quietly around them, grazing under the warm afternoon sun. John and Nava stood together, feeling the quiet certainty of a bond that had grown stronger with each day, through work, trust, and shared experiences. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, John suggested they take a walk to the creek. The water had swelled slightly from the previous storm, sparkling in the fading light. They walked side by side, the soft sound of their footsteps blending with the gentle flow of the creek. "I like this place," Nava said softly. "Even after all the storms, the hard work, and the unexpected challenges, it feels alive. And I think it always will, as long as we take care of it together." John nodded, feeling a sense of completeness he hadn't known before. "Together," he repeated, letting the words sink in. It was more than a promise. It was a recognition that they had faced challenges, learned from each other, and found trust and companionship in the process. At the creek, they paused. John picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water, watching the ripples spread. Nava followed, her laughter soft but genuine as she tried her hand at skipping stones too. For a while, they played in the water, enjoying the simplicity of the moment, the quiet joy of companionship. Eventually, they sat on the bank, watching the sunset reflect on the rippling water. The sky was a canvas of colors, fading from warm oranges to soft purples and deep blues. Nava leaned back slightly, resting her head against her hands. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I never imagined that helping on a ranch could be this meaningful. It's more than just work. It's about connection and learning from each other. And I'm grateful for it." John looked at her, feeling a surge of emotion. "I'm grateful too," he admitted. "Grateful for your help, your perspective, and for you being here. I can't imagine the ranch without you now." Nava turned to him, her eyes shining in the fading light. "And I can't imagine leaving it," she said. "I want to stay, John. Not just for the work, but for us." John felt a smile spread across his face, a warmth that went deeper than anything he had felt in years. "Then stay," he said simply. "Stay, and we'll face whatever comes next together." The work, the storms, the quiet evenings, all of it, together. They sat in silence for a while, letting the moment linger. The sun disappeared below the horizon, and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, and alive with possibility. That evening they returned to the house, where the warmth of the hearth welcomed them. They shared a simple dinner, talking quietly about the day, the plans for the coming week, and the small details of ranch life. There was a comfort in their conversation, a sense that they were no longer two individuals working together, but a team, partners in life as much as in labor. After dinner, John and Nava stepped outside once more. The night was cool, and the sky was filled with stars. The ranch stretched out around them, peaceful and calm. John looked at Nava and felt a quiet certainty in his heart. "This is home," he said softly. "Not just the ranch, but what we've built here together." Nava smiled, reaching for his hand. "Home," she agreed. "I think we've both found something we didn't expect, something worth protecting and cherishing. They stood together in the starlight, feeling the bond they had nurtured through work, challenges, and shared understanding. It was a connection built on trust, respect, and genuine care, the kind of connection that promised a future filled with partnership, friendship, and quiet love. Over the following weeks, life on the ranch continued, but with a new rhythm. John and Nava worked together seamlessly, each respecting the other's strengths, learning from their differences, and finding joy in the shared tasks of daily life. They laughed more, spoke more openly, and found comfort in the simple pleasures of ranch life, tending to cattle, repairing fences, cooking meals, and watching sunsets together. Every evening they would sit by the fire or the creek, talking quietly, sharing thoughts, dreams, and plans for the future. Their bond deepened with every passing day, grounded in the reality of hard work and the quiet satisfaction of partnership. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, John looked at Nava and realized that he had never felt more at peace. The ranch, the animals, and the land were important, yes, but the greatest joy came from the connection they shared, a connection born from respect, trust, and understanding. Nava noticed him watching and reached out, taking his hand in hers. "We've come a long way," she said softly. "We have," John replied, squeezing her hand gently, "and I think we're just getting started." They watched the stars appear side by side, knowing that whatever challenges or storms came next, they would face them together. The ranch was no longer just a place of work or solitude. It was a place of life, growth, and connection. And in that moment, John and Nava understood that they had found not just a partner, but a home in each other and in the life they had built together.